Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 75, inching closer and closer to that episode 100. By the way, congratulations to our friends over at Martial Arts Internetwork with Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff for their 100th episode that I believe is coming. It just came out last week, or it's coming out tonight. Either way, congratulations to Martial Arts Internetwork. That's an awesome milestone. But today on the Jackson Rudolph podcast here with Black Belt Magazine, we have episode 75, and this is kind of a continuation from episode 73, where I had new competitors in the adult division, Haley Glass and Alex Mancias on the show. Today, I am very excited to have Mason Stowell, another kind of young juggernaut that has moved up into the adult division, and it started winning right away. Mason won the overall grand championship at the Battle of Atlanta, beating out the other overall grands winners for CMX forms and CMX weapons, traditional weapons. Mason beat them all with his traditional kata, then shows up at US Open, wins the ISKA title at the Night of Champions. So Mason is on a tear coming up into the adult division. His debut has been practically flawless. So Mason, it's an honor to have you on the show, my man. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Jackson, again for having me. I mean, this is an amazing opportunity. I watch these episodes a lot, so it's a kind of a different experience actually being here and being a part of the show. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure, man. So for our Black Belt Magazine audience, because we kind of have two different audiences here, right? We got the sport karate people like yourself who tune in to hear all the sport karate talk. But then we also have the audience that comes from Black Belt Magazine that's maybe traditional martial artists or school owners that don't really know much about the sport karate world. So let's go all the way back with you for a second. How did this whole martial arts journey start in the first place?
Okay, so for me, my parents have always been, huge believers in just physical activity and sports and whatnot. My dad, is a huge football fan. He likes watching basketball, baseball. He likes pretty much every sport that there is in existence. Same with my mom. So they started me out with T-ball when I was very, very little, and I showed just no interest in it whatsoever. I never swung the bat. So I really wasn't really into like the sports scene. They tried me out with soccer, baseball, ice skating, hockey, and I just was just the worst at pretty much everything. So I really didn't care for it. But I remember at my elementary school, I saw a martial arts demonstration at one of my field days that I had, and all credit goes to Tyler Weaver Sr. and Tyler Weaver Jr. and Riker Weaver. I saw those three put on a demonstration, and being from the same area, it just made sense. I mean, it was just perfect the way everything lined up for me to be able to see that performance. I saw these guys doing these flips and all this crazy karate movements. I was like, man, that looks cool. So that was kind of like the start for me. It was the first time I really showed interest in something. So obviously my parents were all about it. They got me signed up right away. I started karate under Tyler Weaver Sr., which is kind of cool because we're still great friends to this day. I've competed with and traveled the world doing seminars with Tyler and Riker. So it's cool to keep that bond together, from, when I came in under their wing as a 5-year-old white belt, all the way up to now, us competing all together and traveling and teaching and whatnot. So that's kind of how it started for me, just watching a demonstration and just hit it off. I mean, I went to my first karate class and I just knew it was just the most fun I've ever had. And the fact that I was enjoying it and showing interest in it was a huge hit for my parents. So we stuck with it. And here 14 years later, we're still going strong. So
that's awesome. And what's interesting to me is, because I've watched your career for a long time as you were growing up, that I knew that you had trained with the Weavers, but I didn't realize that you started training martial arts under Tyler Sr. and all that. And for those of you tuning in, Tyler Weaver, longtime friend and competitor of mine, teammate on Paul Mitchell. And then Riker, after Tyler kind of stepped away, became a competitor of mine as well. So I've known the Weavers for a long, long time. a ton of respect for their family. And Tyler really played a big role in kind of sport karate, getting some extra media, especially when he was younger. For those of you who don't know, Tyler Weaver was featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show when he was like 9 or 10 years old after doing a blindfolded comma form at US Open. So Mason, training under them, was it pretty much a sport karate upbringing from the beginning? Were you kind of focused on preparing for tournaments from the time you started martial arts? Because a lot of sport karate competitors kind of luck their way into finding tournament, competition, finding sport karate. So training under them, was it pretty much, okay, this is what we're going to do from day one, or where did tournaments really come into the picture?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously they were huge in the tournaments. I remember when I was starting off, I can't remember which tournament it was. It was one of the bigger NASKA events. But I remember like massive trophies, and I was just in awe of those things. So they've always been involved in the tournaments. So I've always looked up to those tournaments and wanted to compete just because I saw what they were doing, and it was like just super inspirational for me. So I mean, looking up to them, I mean, it was a great thing to start, a great point in time to start, and just a great group overall to start with. So yeah, I mean, they've been involved in competitions for the longest time. I remember my first tournament like it was yesterday, to be honest. I mean, I was a green belt, so I really hadn't been doing karate for all that long. But yeah, I remember it was just in the high school gymnasium that was right next to the karate school. And yeah, I mean, it was just like I think it was an in-school tournament, like just an in-house tournament. So there were only like 5-6 competitors per division, but obviously underbelt, or no, I was an orange belt. I remember I was a beginner. So yeah, I started right away in the competition. And I remember my first competition, I took away several first place, and then I think a third place in one of the forms. But surprisingly, starting off, I was more of a fighter. So the sparring aspect, I mean, when I started, I love to spar. And when you're an orange belt, at 6 years old, your favorite thing is probably those like that sword sparring with the foam swords. I don't think they do that anymore, but that was so much fun to me. Yeah, I was a beast. I was the champion sword sparring competitor. So yeah, I mean, I started off with the fighting, the weapons sparring. I actually didn't start like weapons until later on, but yeah, forms sparring. I loved all parts of the competition. So.
That's awesome. And then obviously you've had a very successful career. We talk about your adult debut. You were a very successful junior as well. A full collection of overall grand championships, major tournament wins. And we'll get into some of those details, maybe some of your favorite wins and stuff like that. But ultimately, it landed you in a position to represent Top 10 Team USA, which is one of the top teams in the sport right now. As a Paul Mitchell guy, I've always had a ton of respect for any team that can be successful in point fighting and in forms and weapons. You guys did that at US Open. Top 10 USA was the men's team fighting champion at the Night of Champions. And then guys like yourself and the other Mason Bumba, winning ISKA titles on that stage for the forms and weapons side of things. So I always have a ton of respect for teams that can come out and do that. And Top 10's ability to do that makes them one of the best teams in the world, right? So tell us a little bit your experience from the beginning, because I know you were also on the Amerikick team before things kind of got transferred over. Tell us your experience with getting on a team in the first place and then trying to kind of climb the ranks and eventually get on one of the top 5 best teams in the world.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, when I first started competing NASKA, I didn't have a name on my back. So I came in without a team, completely unseeded, which is a very difficult thing to do. Especially in the era that I started, I hopped right into the division where just some names, Jake Presley, Dallas Liu, Aiden Considine, Kieran Tamadong had already been dominating that division for a couple years now. So going into that division, unseeded without a name on your back was very difficult. But it is what it is. I mean, I think it really, taught me a lot, for sure. But I had to fight for a spot on any team. I remember going to a tournament in Texas, and that's when I met my current coach and instructor, Jarrett Liker. And I did my first lesson with him in end of 2012. And it was I looked up to him like crazy. I mean, I just remember seeing him compete for the first time in championships, and it was just the display of power and intensity and performance was just unmatched. And it was just from that first time seeing him on stage, I just knew that I needed to work with him, and if I wanted to get better with my basics, that he was the guy to go to. So I started working with him in 2012, and it took me a long time to build up that relationship, but after working nonstop for a couple years, he was ready to put me on the American national team. So at that point, I had gone to several of the American local tournaments, Midwest Open, the Kansas City Challenge. So I was kind of working my way up in that local rank, and it took me a while to get on that team, but I knew I really wanted to be on that team, and it worked out in the end. So I got on the national team in 2013 or beginning of 2014. I can't remember, but it was surreal when I got on the team. I was finally a part of something in the league, and it felt amazing to actually have a name on your back going into these tournaments. And I started doing better. I kind of went from placing last to like third to last, so I started slowly working my way up. But it took me a couple years to start actually placing in the top 8. And then once I did, I would just kind of started rolling from there. And then after several years of competing on the national team, I was bumped up to the American World team, which was the biggest. I mean, when I got the news that I was being upgraded onto the world team, it was just the best day of my life. I know I was struggling that year with the tournaments. It was a rough year for me. I remember specifically several times during the year where I was seated in the division, and I was placing 9th in some of my division, and it was a big point in my career, as a junior, where I was like, man, is this really something that I want to keep doing? I trained really hard. I'm not getting the results I wanted. And getting on that world team really boosted my my self-esteem, my confidence. And it was a huge thing for me. And, you look at some of the names that were on the team at the time. You got Michael Guthrie, Vincent Scarduzio, Jarrett Liker, Becca Ross, who is now Becca Liker. You've got Reed Presley, Cole Presley, Jake Presley. I mean, Torres was on the team at the time. It was this squadron, and it felt amazing to be a part of that. Team, and so I'm still with that group. The team has gone through several name changes due to sponsorships, and now we're top 10 Team USA, and we have welcomed many new athletes. A lot of fighters, and a lot more forms competitors now, and I couldn't be happier with the team that I represent. We're a huge family. We're always very supportive of one another, and I consider them all as my best friends on the circuit. I grew up with a lot of these guys and girls, and it was I love everything about the community that the team has altogether. So. Yeah, couldn't be happier with how everything worked out.
That's awesome. And there's nothing better as a competitor when you find that perfect fit and that this is where you belong, and then that team supports you. I had the excuse me if I don't choke on my own words. I had the same experience with Team Paul Mitchell. Like, as you were climbing through the ranks of Amerikick and had your eyes set on, like, you wanted to be on the Amerikick World Competition team. I was that way when I was a kid on Lauren Carney's Premier Martial Arts National Team, and then changed the game. And I was always like, I want Paul Mitchell. I want Paul Mitchell.
Yeah.
And you get there, it's like this awesome feeling of like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
And the most important part of that story that
Yes.
you tell is that it's all about the grind. Like, even when you're not having a good season or whatever, I feel like there's a problem in sport karate right now where there's a lot of parents and competitors alike that just don't understand how teams work as well. And so it's almost like they start soliciting themselves. It's like, oh, like, how do we get on this team? Or how do we get on that team? And it's like, no, you put in the work and the teams come to you. The work comes first, and then the sponsorship opportunities, the name on your back, all of that comes secondary. And so as you were talking about your journey, and you competed in multiple different divisions. At one point, you were competing in almost every division that you could compete in, forms and weapons wise, right? Then as you got older,
everything. Yep.
And then as you got older, you started to specialize. And I talk about this a lot on the show, that we're in the modern era of sport karate. Competitors almost have to specialize. Like, if you want to win the weapons overall, you need to dedicate almost 100% of your time to focusing on weapons. Same thing with traditional forms or CMX forms or what have you. And there are a few special competitors that are able to be a threat in forms and weapons, or in traditional and CMX. But right now, at least for you in the adult division, you're focusing solely on traditional kata, and it's working very well for you. So kind of talk about that decision-making as you got older, and going from kind of a jack of all trades to now a master of a few of them.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe, when you get to this level of competition, when you're young, you kind of want to experiment with all of the divisions. You want to do the traditional forms, you want to do the fighting, you want to do the creative forms, the musical, the extreme, the weapons. You want to kind of experiment with all of the divisions. And I think that's important in choosing. I think if you came in, you're going with just one path, it's very difficult to stay on track and to stay focused. When you have all of those, especially as you're young, when you're competing in all those areas, you really kind of start to see what you like to train, what you don't like to train, what you want to see yourself doing better in, what you're doing well in already. And when you start getting older, once you start kind of breaking into the teenage and young adult age, you start to realize, like, man, I can't do everything. You know what I mean? So especially that was something for me. I was very good at a few number of things, but there was a couple of things that I was just very inconsistent with, and that's part of the reason why I personally stopped doing CMX weapons. I was really good with commas. I obviously I didn't start with commas. I started with my sword, and I have I never made it to stage, but I had made it to runoffs a ton with the sword, and it was one of my favorite weapons, of course. But I decided to change to commas kind of halfway through my weapons career, just because with a sword it's very difficult to do the things that I wanted to do. I was getting very good at tricking, and it was very difficult for me to showcase that specialty of mine with the sword. So I decided to change to commas to kind of show that off just a little bit more. And it helped me a lot. I mean, I did very well with the commas, but and I trained a lot. It was one of my favorite things to train, but it got to be very inconsistent. And I just decided, I wanted to focus on the traditional and the CMX open hand, and then my traditional weapons as well. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions that I made. Of course, I miss it. I miss doing and I still teach it, but I do, I do miss it. But it was the best decision I made as far as training, being able to dedicate more time into the things that you were doing really well with, and that you're a little bit more comfortable with, and I saw my other divisions I started doing it way better in my other categories. And I think that's important when you're young, to kind of just realize, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to dedicate, more time to. And that's part of growing as a martial artist. I think it's really, really important. So yeah, that's kind of my take on everything.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great position to have, is you identify kind of what your niche is, and then you do work as hard as you can to fulfill it. You might still be very good at other things, but you've got to focus on what it is that's going to make you known and make you successful. And then you're also well able to continue to teach those other things as well. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
A lot of people don't realize this. I competed in extreme weapons and musical forms up until I was like 14 years old. Like all of my years in 13 and under, I was doing those divisions that, like, if people know me now, they're like, there's no way you ever did that, right? But it's what I did early on because I was trying to figure out what I was good at. And then over time, I kind of figured out that bow and CMX bow in particular was going to be my niche, right? Now, you are somebody, like I was mentioning, some people can be successful in both. Some people have the unique talent to be able to win the traditional and win the CMX. The end of your junior career, you were dominant in CMX forms. You had the shuriken cutter, you had the cat-like landing on the Webster, you had the unique intro, you had the swag. Like, you were almost untouchable in CMX forms. And in the adult division, we haven't seen it yet. So the $1 million question is, will we see a Mason Stowell CMX form in the adult division anytime soon?
Yes, we will. The main reason I haven't been competing it is just because of the other leagues I've been competing with, and the current situation with the tournaments all over the globe with my WKF. And just with my move, a lot of people don't know this, but just moving to Kansas City, I moved from Denver to Kansas City about a month ago. And it was a really big change for me, but we're opening up a new school out here, and I'm dedicating a lot of time to my new students and building the school and learning the systems and everything. So there's a lot that I career-wise need to focus on. So there was just some things that didn't work out, and again, that's just part of growing as a martial artist, kind of understanding that competition isn't always the most important thing, but inspiring the next generation and teaching and kind of just building yourself for other people is sometimes just a little bit more important. So, but not 100% out. Just you'll definitely see more from me soon, for sure.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, congratulations on the move. Congratulations on opening the new school. We wish you all the best with that. I know that anybody tuning into Black Belt can agree that more martial arts schools are always a good thing for our industry, right? So best of luck with that.
Sir.
Also, I'm thrilled to hear that we're going to get those CMX forms back, because I'm a fan. I'll admit it. Yep. Even though teams, rivals, whatever, I'm a fan of the Mason Stowell CMX form. But anyway, bring us an easy segue, because you mentioned that you were focused on some of the WKF stuff. And because a lot of our viewers are sport karate viewers, not all open tournament goers understand the inner workings of the WKF and the rankings and getting on the U.S. national team. It's funny. I actually saw a comment, I think it was on Facebook recently, from Becca Liker, one of your coaches, Jarrett's wife, right? And she was saying, like, it was something like, all these people in this division have American flag patches, but only one of them's on actually the American national team, talking about you, right?
Yes.
There's so many open circuit people that just don't get it. And by the way, I agree with what Becca was saying. I was like, well, yeah, Mason's the only one that actually is on that team. So just kind of, and this might be a long-winded answer, but I'll make it a long-winded question. Take us from the way that the tournaments work, going to Premier League events, all the way through getting on the U.S. team, and then kind of wrap that all up with, what are your goals? What are you looking at moving forward? Because Tokyo is obviously right around the corner, so it's looking like that's not something that you're focused on right now, but maybe the next time that that karate is featured in the Olympics, right? So just kind of take us through that whole thing, and I apologize for just dropping that big chunk on you, but for somebody that doesn't know much about the WKF, like a lot of our open tournament audience, take us through that.
Absolutely. So WKF is the largest karate league in the world. It is going to be in the 2020 Olympics, even though technically it's 2021, it's still 2020 Olympics. So it's a huge organization with millions of competitors. It's something that I wasn't really wanting to do. Coming from NASKA, competing, it didn't appeal to me at first, but after watching some of the tournaments and following, some of the people that have been winning on the league, I started to realize, wow, this is intense. Like, this is competition like I've never seen before. I was used to, the largest in the United States, which is big, but when you go to these WKF events, I mean, there's a whole new level of professionalism that it holds that just absolutely blew my mind. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of it once I kind of understood the meaning and how grand really the league was, especially with the 2020 Olympics and the WKF becoming IOC recognized. So it was definitely something that I wanted to start doing. And of course, I was in the perfect position with the best coach, best mentor to help me get to where I am now. So shout out to my coach and mentor, Jared Liker, for helping me on that path and getting me started and getting to where I am. Obviously nowhere near being done, but very, very proud of how far both of us have come in the league as a coach and as a competitor. So, but yeah, I mean, coming from NASKA, it was a different set of rules, a different style of competition. I went to my first WKF tournament in Shanghai in 2018. And I realized when I lined up with all these guys, in the NASKA division being, let's see, how old was I? I had just turned 16. So I had just turned 16. So I was just eligible to compete in the league. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. So I competed in my first, not Premier League tournament. It was a Series A. So it's just a step down from the Premier League. But regardless, still a WKF event. And I just remember lining up next to some guys from Japan, and then some guys from Spain and Austria and a couple of different other countries, Italy. I looked around and I was used to being the big dog in my division in NASKA. I was a bigger kid. I was bigger than a lot of these kids I was competing against. When I got there, I was tall, but I was not big like these guys were. And these guys were strong. And I went in there with my NASKA strength, which was very, very strong, especially as a 16-year-old. But I was nowhere near where these guys were. And it was completely eye-opening. You see these guys on the video, like on YouTube, on TV, and you're like, wow, this guy's strong. When you're there in person and you feel the earthquake every time that they take a step in their stances, you're like, okay, all right, this is it. So that kind of challenged me when I got to that first tournament. Again, I was still a little skeptical. When I got there and I saw it, I was like, okay, I was doing very well in NASKA, but I knew that I wanted a new challenge, and this was going to be it. I mean, this is the highest level. So I did my first tournament. I did not do fantastic. I was so nervous going into that division. I got a very, very difficult draw first round, of course, but I got my name out there. It was an American athlete going into a new league, and the judges saw me. So, I made a statement, and I was happy. So we started preparing. We buckled down as soon as we got back, and we just really hammered down the training. And the biggest thing, and this is, I think what helped me the most, I knew that I needed to get bigger to compete with these guys. So I put on a lot of weight. I started my lifting, my weight training. And I seriously think that has been a huge, huge part of my success in the league coming up, because I knew what I needed to do. My coach, he helped me get through it. And huge shout out to my dad too. I mean, he really was the one that pushed my weight training and got me to where I needed to be as far as the lifting side of things. So he was definitely a good coach. So between my two coaches there. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I went into the league completely unranked. Not completely, because I had competed. I had a little bit of experience competing under USA, NKF, and PKF. So I had some points to get me into that league, but relatively unranked. I had never competed in an actual WKF. I competed in the youth league, in PKF, USA, NKF, but not the actual adult WKF division. So it was a completely new experience for me. And basically from that point on, I've been consistent with my tournaments. That was December of 2018, and then in June of 2019, I passed my first round, which was amazing. I mean, that was, something I had been fighting for a long time, actually beating one of those guys. And that was a huge thing for me. Was okay, I know I'm getting better. Seeing that progress was just so good to see. And 2019 was a big year of growth for me. That year I went to Tokyo. I had gone to Chile. I had gone to Moscow, Madrid. I had been to pretty much a lot of the Premier League tournaments that year. So I was doing it. I was actually a part of the league and competing in it and doing well. I remember in September of 2019 going to Chile. It was a big tournament because it was the tournament right after Tokyo, and after Tokyo I had beaten one of the top guys from Spain, which, being again only 16, I was like, wow, okay, watching this guy's videos to now beating him in the round, I was blown away. So that next tournament, it was a huge stepping stone for me. I had a lot of people that were looking at me, and I absolutely did phenomenal at that tournament. I ended up beating the number 5 ranked competitor for the Olympics this year, and I'm very, very proud of that. As a 16-year-old, not even competing for a full year, and again, all my shout outs going to my coaches and my mentor for getting me to that spot. So from that point on, it's just been, always, increasing in the ranking, passing more rounds every tournament. And, and then this year, after obviously 2020 was a rough year because of COVID, only did 2 tournaments or only one or 2 tournaments that year. And, then COVID hit, and it was a difficult year for all of the karate athletes going into that. And then I was able to maintain my ranking. And this year, first tournament back after over a year of no competition, I ended up advancing 4 rounds into the medal match. And I knew that, I was there. I mean, I had not necessarily made it, but, done everything that I could with that year off. A lot of people had taken that year and decided, okay, we rest, we relax. I took that year and I had the most growth in that year, and it definitely paid off. And in that same tournament, beating the number 2 seed in the US was amazing. Very, very good. It was my first time going head to head with him. Fantastic competitor, and beating him was a huge goal of mine. But it was a big thing for me, for sure. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how my journey has started, how it's going as of right now. I am preparing to go to Egypt in a couple months for the next Premier League, which is going to be an absolutely massive tournament for me, just because of the new rules in the WKF, which I'll get into in just a second. So yeah, preparing like crazy for that tournament. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how the journey is going so far with WKF.
That's awesome. And we certainly wish you all the best with that journey moving forward. And it seems like the growth that you were kind of pushed to have through competing in the WKF is a big part of the reason why all of a sudden you show up in the NASKA adult division and you're as dominant as you are or have been. is because of the fact that you had all that growth that was necessitated by competing in the WKF, which has the best traditional kata competitors in the world, right?
Absolutely.
NASCA always tries to push a reputation of we have the best competitors, and that is true within the CMX divisions, and that is true in point fighting compared with WACO and WACO and NASCA both have great point fighters, right? But when it comes to traditional kata, the WKF is where it's at. So by preparing for those events, that certainly has helped elevate you to that level. You did mention some rule changes going into this tournament in Egypt. Maybe just briefly summarize what you mean by those rule changes for the WKF.
Yeah. So before I get into that, I will kind of discuss how the rankings work. So in the WKF, there are two major rankings for kata. There is the WKF rankings, the world rankings, which is overall. Essentially, imagine if I'm putting this into NASCA terms, everyone that has ever competed in NASCA, imagine they keep all of their points that they've ever made from their divisions, and all of the winnings. Every time you win a first place at a 6A, a 5A, you get those points and they rack up over time. Imagine the world rankings in NASCA as you, Jackson Rudolph, every point that you've ever won from a division, keeping those points and just racking them up over time. That's the world rankings. So a lot of these guys, Antonio Diaz, for example, he is pushing 40 years old. I think he is 42, actually, something like that. He has been competing in the league for almost 25 years now. So imagine those rankings over those 25 years. Obviously, he is ranked very high. So being in my position in the world ranking, I couldn't be more happy. Ranked number 38 for being only 18 is absolutely phenomenal. And very, very proud of that, especially when a lot of these guys have been competing for 25 years, so having that amount of points at only 18 years old is something that means a lot to me. And I'm very, very proud of that. Moving on to the K1 rankings in the Premier League, that is more of a relevant ranking system. So if I can put this into NASCA terms as well, basically you have the NASCA World Tour, right? The World Tour is like the K1. So in WKF, you have your K1, which is the Premier League tournaments. In NASCA, you have your World Tour, which are basically the 6A and the 5A tournaments, basically the bigger tournaments. Those points, basically whoever competes in those bigger tournaments, those points from that year that they competed are the K1 rankings. So in NASCA, for example, there would be the 2021 NASCA World Tour rankings. That is essentially the same thing as the WKF 2021 K1 ranking. And in that, for this year, for 2021, I am ranked 13th, which is, again, a phenomenal place to be at for being only 18 years old. I don't believe there has been a competitor under the age of 19 to be in the top 10 in the world. So being at that 13th slot at 18 is a huge thing, is a huge deal for me. Absolutely. So that's kind of how I can break down the rankings for people that might not understand. And I hope that made sense. So, but yeah, the new rules in the WKF for the world ranking. So the overall world ranking of all of the points of everybody that has ever competed. Those that are placed or that are going into the 2022 season, those who are ranked top 32 are allowed to compete in the Premier League, and the spots 33, ranked 33 and up all the way to basically 100, will have to compete in the Series A tournaments, which are a lower level of tournaments. Imagine 6A versus 5A, essentially, or 5A versus 4A. That's kind of how it's broken down. Right now, I'm ranked 38. 38, there's 36, so I'm a few spots away from making that point. Competing in the Premier League is very, very important to me. I absolutely do not want to go back to competing at the Series A tournaments. So that's why this next tournament in Egypt is so important to me. Building up that point, those points going into next year. I need to basically break those 4 4 or 5 spots below me and get into that top 32 if I want to continue competing on the highest level of competition that there is to offer. So that's why very, very big end of the year coming up for me. And part of the reason why I haven't really been focusing that much on CMX, just because I absolutely need to make that top 32, and I need to devote 100% of my time into my WKF preparation. So that's why it's bittersweet. I do miss the CMX and whatnot, but I absolutely just need to focus on the bigger picture here. And when I am comfortable with my ranking in the WKF, I will go back and try and bring back that fun stuff. So
that's awesome. Well, first, thank you for that excellent breakdown, especially putting it into kind of sport karate NASKA terms for our NASKA sport karate audience. That was one of the best descriptions of how that all works that I've ever heard. So thank you for that. And then I'm not a betting man, but
yes, I'm glad.
I'd be willing to bet that you can push yourself into that top 32, and everybody here at Black Belt
absolutely
will be cheering you on to reach that level. Because, by the way, there's a Black Belt Magazine rankings update coming soon. The committee, I've submitted all the results from the Battle of Atlanta US Open to the committee. The committee's going over all that. But one thing that we already know is who the newly minted champions are going to be. And because you won the US Open, you will also be the champion rank, which is the highest honor within the Black Belt Magazine rankings for the men's traditional foods category. So as Black Belt Magazine, we want you in that top 32 as well, so that our champion can be out there competing in the Premier League and everything. So congratulations on that. And we wish you all the best with all the WKF and Premier League moving forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you guys. It really does. So thank you.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. So now we've been kind of relating everything to sport karate. So now for our NASKA people who might have a headache right now, let's bring it back to NASKA a little bit, right? So Battle of Atlanta, your debut in the NASKA adult division, which is a big deal. Now there's prize money involved, and that's really the biggest benefit of competing in the NASKA adult division in particular, is that's where historically some of the best prize money has been for sport karate competitors, right? It's a little bit reduced right now due to COVID-19 relief and tournaments trying to build back, but money's still money, right? So you go up into the adult division, you win your way all the way through the Battle of Atlanta. I guess my first question is, was it what you expected? Was there anything that surprised you about the level of competition or the way things went? Obviously, maybe competing in that extra grand championship round may have caught you off guard, because I don't know how many people knew that was coming until a week or two before the event. But just kind of take us through your experience in that adult debut.
Yeah, I mean, going into it, it was pretty much exactly how I was planning on it going out. And I hate saying planning, I don't plan for anything. I train to perform, and that's what I did. I performed my best, and I knew basically after I hit a solid kata, I knew how I was going to end up. Just because I felt good. I felt good that weekend. It was a good weekend of competition for me and for everybody for that matter. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. So as far as my debut, I mean, yeah, there was definitely that extra little bit of kind of pressure going into it. A lot of people, they haven't seen me for a couple years, almost 2 years now, and they were excited to see me just because I had been competing at this whole new level of competition, and it was absolutely amazing to come back and be able to perform for everybody and kind of show basically everybody what I've been up to. And it's very refreshing, that the judges were, they liked my katas, and a lot of people had come up to me after my performances and congratulating me on everything and talked to me. So it was very heartwarming to me as a competitor coming in as kind of the young blood, but still, having that respect level was really, really meaningful. So I mean, as far as the debut goes, it was everything that I had hoped for and more.
That's awesome. And congratulations on taking the big win there. And I always say respect is earned by performance, right? So I think that a lot of that respect that you got at Battle of Atlanta was earned by the fact that you came out and looked like a beast and won everything there was to win there. And that brings me to a follow-up question, because this gets really interesting, especially when we look at the youth and the junior divisions, how they still have CMX competing against traditional. Even in the adult division, The women's grands still have the CMX compete against the traditional. Men's are separate for that overalls. But at Battle of Atlanta, you guys went on, and it was you against CMX weapons with Connor Chastain and CMX forms with Danny Etkin, as well as the 30 plus senior winner Ray Kellison, and then the traditional weapons representative Joey Castro. So kind of all of the men's overall grand championship winners going against one another. So the question is simple. What's your take on this traditional versus CMX in night shows and in grand championship rounds? What do you think of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was definitely something different. Going into the tournament, I knew that there was going to be kind of a different grand championship than what I was used to. So that being said, I still wasn't quite prepared for the moment that they told me what exactly it was that we were doing. So it was still a surprise to me. I mean, I knew that there was going to be something, but I didn't know it was going to be the qualification process, the stage. You know, I'm like, hey, so wait, who am I going against? Oh, you're going against these people. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's quite the list there. I mean, obviously tons of talent and, you know, we're up on that stage that night. So going into it, I knew I had to turn it up a notch. So, you know, changing up the form a little bit to a little bit more of a performance and speed. You know, there's a lot of strategy that goes into it that my coach helps me with. And, you know, it's, you know, when you're going against, you know, the flashy stuff, you kind of have to hang with them in essence. So you have to perform something that the judges are going to like and is relatable, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, going into it, it was definitely a surprise, but I prepared for that, and it was good. I mean, I did well, and I felt good about my performances, and, you know, I couldn't be happier with the result.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way that you broke that down, how there's adjustments that can be made as a traditional competitor, whether it's kata or weapon. Mm-hmm. There's adjustments that can be made to better prepare yourself to compete against the CMX. And my position is this. I understand separating it so the traditional only competes against the traditional and the CMX only competes against the CMX. But my thing is make it consistent between the divisions. If the men are going to be separated, separate the women as well. Let the women have their own traditional grand and CMX grand.
Absolutely.
Or if one's going to be together, put them both together. At least just have consistency between one and the other so that you have a level of equality between men and women, youth and adult, whatever the case may be. But I digress. I could go on about that.
Absolutely.
So now we'll get to US Open.
Absolutely. I understand.
You had the opportunity to compete in the Night of Champions in a head-to-head showdown, traditional versus traditional. Joey Castro, who was kind of the veteran of the adult division, with you coming up as the young blood, like you mentioned, right? And so that was kind of the storyline going into it. So very different than what you had at Battle of Atlanta, where you were against the CMX competitors. Now you go on stage at US Open. It's a head-to-head traditional showdown. Just kind of take us through your US Open experience and maybe how that was different from Atlanta. And then, of course, how it felt to come out on top on the Night of Champions stage.
Absolutely. I mean, I went into US Open with the exact same game plan I went into Battle of Atlanta with. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to perform for everybody. There was still kind of, you know, this new thing, you know, where, you know, I was still kind of new in the division. You know, it's only my second tournament. And of course, this was the biggest tournament of the year. So a lot of people were curious to, you know, as to what I was going to do. And, you know, but preparation was the same going into it. I knew what the judges liked, and I performed it just like that. It was a not exactly easy road. It wasn't like how it was in Atlanta. I mean, when I competed in my first division, I ended up taking second, and I was you know, a little shocked, but, you know, it's like, it is what it is. You know, the judges saw, you know, what they saw. They gave me the scores that they did. Actually, I had a couple of the judges come up to me afterwards and tell me kind of why they gave me the score, and I was a little shocked. but to say the least.
I know.
But I digress. I was, obviously I take all criticism, with, as it is, that's what they saw it as, it's all good. I'll just win tomorrow. And that was kind of my mentality in the tournament that weekend, and end up winning the next division, and then carrying it all the way through to the overall grands in the night show, which was kind of interesting, that they didn't do it exactly how they did in Atlanta, where you did the overall grands, which you won the prize money for, and then you went to the overall, or the ultimate grands, which there was a whole separate prize money for that, and that was the ultimate title. They combined the overall and the ISKA champion night show performance kind of into one. So, winning the ISK night show was winning the overall grand championship. So that was just a little bit different between the two tournaments. But I mean, regardless, it was still the same as far as, winning the ultimate title, versus just, one of the titles. So I thought it was just, a little bit, again, inconsistent, with the grand, just seeing, different. I was just a little confused because, just the way how it turned out. But when I was told that the night show was going to be kind of combined into the overall grands and ISKA as one, or the ISKA as one grand championship. I mean, obviously it's like a double grand, so you really want to make sure that you have a good performance for that. So, and I did just that. I mean, I knew that the judges were kind of, I don't know if they were sick of kind of seeing what I was doing with my katas, but they obviously did not like, one of the katas that I did. So I had to change it up for the Night of Champions in the ISKA and the overall grand championship in the night show. So I did change it up. I went with a power kata. I saw the panel of judges when I walked out onto the stage, and I was like, okay, I know what I need to do, what I need to change. And I had talked to my coach about it. We put in some work on the side, actually, after day 2 of competition, and we were just kind of putting some things together, trying to decide what we wanted to do. And we came to the conclusion that I was going to compete with Super Rempe on the nighttime finals. And that was kind of that's my roots. I grew up competing with that kata. My coach grew up competing with that kata. He dominated the adult division with that kata for the longest time. And then my close teammate and friend, Derek Megan, competed with that kata and dominated with that kata for the longest time. So I just feel like it was time, to bring it back. There was a lot of flashy, snappy katas that were being performed. And I think the judges just wanted to see something a little bit different. Even though, this kata isn't a new kata, but it hasn't been competed well in a long time. And I think they were really, wanted to see that performance again, coming from my lineage and my instructor, that power background that all of us have. I think they were kind of craving that, and that was just exactly what I needed to do. And the judges loved it. So, and that's all I could ask for, is giving a good performance. So
that's awesome. And obviously the judges did love it, because you wound up taking home the title. And I want to talk about that decision a little bit, but to provide a little bit of context for everybody at home that might be raising an eyebrow, like, wait, they did the NASCA overall and the ISK at the same time. How does that work? So a lot of people, and I didn't know that a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of people don't realize the ISK Night of Champions is completely invitational. The production committee for the Night of Champions typically has a list of who they want on stage before the US Open ever happens. This year, that was a little bit different, because we only had a tournament before. Typically, we have 4, 5, 6 tournaments leading up to US Open. This year, we just had Atlanta. So more competitors had an opportunity to win their way on stage at the US Open. And even in a normal year, a competitor can have an outstanding performance at US Open and win their way on stage. And so, like, in the men's CMX weapons division, which I've been in for 5 years now as an adult, which makes me feel old. But oftentimes it wouldn't, because there's so many different spots available in that division, it wouldn't work out to be the exact division they had intended for the nighttime finals. So we would run our NASCA overall during the daytime, and then the ISKA show would still be invitational. Sometimes, though, it worked out to where oh, hey, the people in the NASCA overall are the same people that we had kind of pre-selected to
Yep.
go on for the ISKA title, then they'll just do them at the same time. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened
Right.
to you, which understandably can be hard to follow. But anyway, so
yeah, definitely.
The next thing that I want to talk about is that decision making for you to run Super MPay, which is one of my favorite forms that you run. I think it's your bread and butter. Like you mentioned, you've competed with it since you were a kid. And a lot of people just in general, right? Supar is kind of a long form and there's a lot of repetitive moves. And so Supar gets a bad rap sometimes for being a boring form, right? But you are one of the people who it's like, I don't get bored when I watch your Supar. It's entertaining all the way through because of the skill level that's being executed. And then also just watching that division, I thought that your competitor, Joey Castro, made an unusual decision for him in running Paparin, which is a form that we rarely ever see him run, right? And he did a good job with it and everything.
Right.
It was not what we would typically see from Joey. So from your perspective as a competitor, it sounds like your decision to run Supar came from understanding the way the judges had been scoring you so far that weekend. But how much does another competitor's choice, say a competitor that is a contender in the division, goes up before you and does a particular kata, does that have any bearing on the kata that you choose? Maybe just take us through a brief description of the strategy that you use when selecting a kata. Is it 100% based on you, 100% based on the judges, 100% based on what others do, a mix of all of that? How exactly does that strategy come into play?
I absolutely think it has something to do with it. I mean, I was actually just talking to one of my fellow competitors in Atlanta about this. He came up to me after the division and he was like, hey, so, you know, you did this kata, which was Anandai, and you did this kata and there were, you know, out of the 18 people in the division, 12 of them did that kata. Why didn't you change it up? And for me, it's a mentality thing. When you see these people doing Anandai, it's like, yeah, they're doing a lot of Anandai, but my Anandai is better. You know, it's setting yourself apart in that side of the competition, that the judges will actually, you know, versus doing a kata that you're not quite as comfortable with. You know, the judges will see that. They will see that you're confident doing that kata. So even if, you know, 80% of the division is doing that kata, you do that exact same kata and you perform it like it's your best kata and like you just killed it, they're gonna give you the win. And that's kind of the mindset that goes into it. And that's what I was explaining to him, is because, you know, he was like, last minute he decided to change it up, you know, and it ended up hurting him, where, you know, versus, you know, competing with his confident kata, you know. So even though it might seem, you know, you'll get lost in the crowd, you really don't. You actually set yourself out more by competing with that confidence, if that makes sense. So I mean, a lot of it is that mentality that you have to have, that okay, I know I'm better than a lot of these katas that these guys are performing. And obviously, you know, a lot of them, all of them were fantastic katas, and it was like, you know, I'm looking at them, I'm like, okay, maybe, you know, this is really good. But again, just going back and just say, okay, I still know I can perform this, you know, better than these guys. So that's a lot of the mentality that goes into it. And you know, when it comes to Joey, I think he made a phenomenal choice. I mean, obviously, what he was competing with at the previous tournament, I can't remember what kata he did, but he made the right adjustment, and it worked out for him. And you know, props to him. I mean, that's just good competition. You know, good call on his part, and it worked. So you know, I have to come back and see, you know, go back to the drawing board and make my adjustments as well, to make sure that, you know, I can secure my spot and whatnot. But you know, that's the biggest part of it, especially with traditional forms. You know, with CMX, you could take the same form and be like, okay, this guy's, you know, really good, let me just add a different trick combo in, you know what I mean? Or let me add an extra section in at the end. You know, it's not like that. If you do that in traditional kata, you're going to get disqualified, because obviously people know the katas, so that, you know, you can't just, you know, change it. So you have to perform it. So you have to, you know, decide if you want to do this, if you want to do this kata, if you want to, you know, how you want to do it, if you want to perform it with a lot of strength and a lot of, you know, or if you want to go for more of an explosive route, a lot of finesse, which was a big part of what Joey did. He had a lot of finesse in his popperin, which popperin is a very explosive kata. And he performed it in a way that not a lot of people had seen before. And it was absolutely a good call on his part. The judges liked what they saw. So, props to him for doing that. Absolutely good, martial arts decision. So.
Excellent answer. Love you showing respect to your competitor, their decision making, as well as explaining some of your own mentality. I thought that was beautifully spoken on your part. So thank you for that. So as we approach the end of the show, you mentioned Supar, and of course you mentioned your coach, Jarrett Liker. And one thing that I will always give Jarrett all the credit in the world for is that he changed traditional kata on the Nascar circuit. Prior to the Jarrett Liker era, the predominant type of traditional form was a contemporary traditional form. Hybrid forms of different katas mixed together, low stances, standing on one foot for extended periods of time, holding out front kicks and side kicks. And you hear Will Cornell, and then before that, Scott Wu, and then before that, one of my favorites, John Su, right? And so all of these more contemporary traditional forms had been dominant for decades, really since Gabe Reynaga. And then Jarrett comes along, introduces the WKF style, wins a Warrior Cup, wins the US Open, wins a Diamond Ring. And then now you look at the traditional kata division and everybody is doing WKF style forms, just like what Jarrett really introduced to the circuit. So I give Jarrett all of the props in the world. It's so hard to change the way that people look at a division, and he did that successfully. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about Jarrett and what that's meant to you, as well as I'm curious, because you would have started sport karate at a time when some of those more contemporary forms were still winning. Did you have any favorites? Like me personally, I loved watching Will Cornell. I know what Will Cornell and what Jarrett do is very different, but I loved the entertainment factor of Will Cornell. So speak a little bit about Jarrett, of course, because he's earned it. He's your coach. But then also, was there anybody else that did the more contemporary style that you're like, okay, I enjoyed watching that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I have an answer that might, kind of surprise you, but I mean, I knew when I saw Jarrett that it was just, he was just on a whole new level of competition. And he had it. He had the swagger. I mean, he would go out there. When he walks onto the mat, you're like, this guy won. He already won, and he hasn't even got onto the stage yet. So it's just kind of that, it's kind of that vibe that you bring into competition. That it's just it's unmatched. The confidence level when you go against someone like Jarrett Liker is just like nothing I've ever seen before. And that's why I knew when I saw him compete, it was just like, wow, okay, I know what I need to be doing. I know what I want to be doing. And it's just kind of funny, he goes out there and he performs, the first time that I see him compete, this amazing kata. And I'm just like, wow. We were at a smaller tournament, so the night show wasn't necessarily like super big. It was in a smaller room, so you could kind of like hear everything. I just remember him getting off the mat. And he was like, oh, I messed up. I did this. And he was already thinking about his adjustments. And I'm like, what? Like that was amazing. You know what I mean? And, that's just kind of that mentality that you got to have. I mean, he's always striving to be better. And he does. Every single tournament, he comes back better and better and better. It never is just the same. It's always climbing and always getting better and better. So, I mean, he even as he got older, I mean, he was still beating the up and coming guys that had the big names. And so it was a huge I mean, that was obviously he is just that's my biggest name is watching Jarrett. So a couple of other guys. I mean, before I got into Japanese kata, the biggest, I don't want to say the biggest, but the most intense competitor was actually Cole Ecker.
Yeah.
When I watched him compete, and he's not known as a traditional forms guy, but I remember watching him, and he did a more contemporary form that really nobody competes anymore with now. It's just going against these Japanese katas is you can't really there's no match. But, back in, 2008, 9, this is what was winning. And I just remember seeing, his intensity was really, really big. And I actually give him a lot of credit to how I perform, because I remember seeing him when I was at my local school in Colorado. My instructor showed me a video of him, and I was like, man, that guy is intense. Like, I want to be like that. So ever since I watched him, I kind of changed my performance. And since then it has changed more and more, but I've always held that strong performance aspect. And I do credit Cole Eckert for kind of, leading the way, or leading me into that, even if it was just one form that I saw of his, from AKA Grands one year. I was like, man, I got to be intense like him if I want to do well in the league. So that was a big name, and that, that might shock a lot of people, but that's what it was. It was, that's who I thought had a really good performance. So.
Absolutely. I love that. That's one thing that I love about doing this podcast, is that we have the opportunity to bring up names like that. And it makes me feel old, because Cole was just a couple of years older than me. And so Cole was known for his bow forms, right? Like his CMX bow forms.
Yeah.
He won a US Open with it back in the day. It was maybe 2009 or 8, something like that. He won the 13 and under overall at US Open. And then I was competing against him, like in the division and then in the runoffs. And so that was like one of the guys that I had to try to like overcome to like become a great bow competitor myself. And his name doesn't get mentioned.
Yeah.
It's like, there was a time when I was a bow guy that had to beat Cole Eckert, you know what I mean? And then I was able to put in the work and make that happen at the time. But it's like, names like that still deserve to be mentioned. Another one with bow that I talk about is Billy Ledger. Billy Ledger is a name that like hardly anybody today knows, because he wasn't like a dominant champion in his era, but the innovation that he did with the bow tricks, similar to that of a Nate Andrade, who's another big inspiration for me. These are names of guys who weren't winning every overall on stage, so you don't hear about them anymore now. But back in 2007, 2008, and before that even, these guys were pioneers of what sport karate would become today. So I think it's always awesome to give shout outs to people like that whose names don't get mentioned often enough.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Mason, thank you so much for your time today. This has been awesome. We've covered a wide variety of topics, a little bit of sport karate history, definitely education about the way WKF works and all that. Like I said before, we wish you all the best with that. So we'll close with any closing thoughts and comments from you, and what's next?
Not really anything. I mean, what's next for me is obviously short term. I'm focusing on Egypt. I need to get into that top 32 in WKF, and then we'll see what happens after that. I mean, I'm still trying to think of that. I keep thinking about that CMX form, and I'm like, man, I need to compete that again. So I want to get busy on that. So, but just taking one thing at a time, focusing on the major things first. And then, hopefully soon I'll get back to having some fun in NASCA. So.
Awesome. Well, we'd love to hear that. Again, thank you so much for your time. Everybody tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in, especially if you made it this far in the show. Go ahead, if you enjoyed this, hit that share button. That's how we spread the message of sport karate. Keep making this sport bigger and better like we all want it to be. Hit that share button so that all your family and friends see this episode. Drop those likes. If you got questions, drop them in the comments below. Tag me, tag Mason. We'll be sure to try to check those out. This has been episode 75 of the Jackson Rudolph podcast, and I'll see you next time.